Okay, we are live. Well, good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure for me to have my colleague, Theresa Bilicek, with me on this episode of the Aspire to Grow podcast and on LinkedIn as well. Now, if you're joining us, I would love you to post in the comment where you're joining us from. And if you're live, and even if you're watching afterwards, we would still like to know where you are joining us from. So let me introduce you to Theresa Bilicek. Theresa is a dynamic leadership coach dedicated to empowering people managers and emerging leaders. With over 9 years of experience coaching professionals across Fortune 100 and Fortune 500 companies, she specializes in helping managers shift from high performing individual contributors to confident strategic leaders. As a professional certified coach, Theresa has coached hundreds of first time managers, guiding them through the critical leadership transition from doing the work to leading others effectively. She's known for her thought provoking coaching style, powerful questioning, and ability to help leaders their full potential. Unlock their full potential through self awareness, emotional intelligence, and strategic delegation. Her coaching approach goes beyond leadership skills. She helps managers develop their unique leadership style, build trust with their teams, and create lasting impact. Today, she's here to share actionable strategies on one of the biggest challenges new managers face, shifting from doer to delegator. Get ready for an insightful conversation that will transform how you lead. So, Theresa, welcome. Thank you so much for being my guest today. And I was so happy when you reminded me the other day that I was one of the first participant or in the summit 9 years ago when you
Yes.
started your business.
Yes,
And
I did. Yes, you were.
I had the first my first guest on the Aspire to Grow podcast was Janice Sutherland, and I was her first guest when she started her podcast. So, a lot of first here,
Yes.
just meeting here. So I am so happy. I am thrilled actually to have you as my guest today.
Well, thank
So,
you so much, Daisy. Appreciate that. I'm so glad to do this for you.
okay, I am thrilled as well. So let us jump right into it, Teresa. In addition to what I just read about you,
Mhm.
is there anything else about your background that inspired you to focus on coaching first-time managers?
Well, one of the things in coaching so many individuals, I discovered that the first time managers are really struggling because they're making that shift. What's made them be successful as individual contributors kind of tends to hold them back when they become a manager. So I see so many of them frustrated, tired, overworked. And so it's really helped me kind of want to reach out and help them become strategic leaders, which is a big difference between doing and leading.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I appreciate that comment because I coach pretty much in that realm as well.
Mhm.
And I am finding it that it's difficult for first time managers to kind of forget that, you know what, here I was an individual contributor there, but
Mhm.
here I have to manage other people.
Mhm.
And one of the challenges that I've found or they're finding is that when they have to lead or to manage their former peers, it's
Mhm.
a big problem. So can
Mhm.
you just expand on that part of it in terms of how do they, how does a first time manager develop strategies that help them to set boundaries and, apart from, yes, we are friends, but, I'm also your leader or your manager.
Yes, there are special challenges when you now lead the team of your peers versus someone that's a first time manager to a completely different team. So some of the challenges, just as you said, Daisy, are, we used to be friends. Now, how do I manage you? But there's advantages to it too, because one of the things is for it's having that mind shift and to start to delegate, so you don't have to feel like you have to do it all. But part of the first start of delegating is knowing people's strengths. So you have the advantage because you already know kind of the strengths of your peers and
Mm-hmm.
who to delegate what to. So it can actually speed that up versus someone who has to take the time to really get to know the strengths of their team,
Mm-hmm.
both in the skills that they have, but the way they approach things.
Yes, that's actually a good way to put it. I had never thought of that part of it, to say they already know their team members and know their strengths. So it's not, they don't have to teach them anything new. That's a good way to put it. Thanks for that. Now, what's the biggest mind shift new managers need to make when moving from doer to delegator?
Well, they people get promoted because of their talents and their strengths, because of all the things they've been doing. It's made them successful. That's how their success has been measured. The shift is now you need to realize you're not measured on just your skills, you're measured on the success of the team. And part of that role is developing the team. It's not just about you anymore. It's how you're helping the team to grow and also work with cross-functional teams and help them maybe work with relationships or knowing some of the things that maybe processes that can be improved upon or those kind of things. So you have to really have the time to be a strategic thinker, because that's what you're really one of the reasons people are promoted into a leadership role is to be a strategic thinker. So
Mm-hmm.
when a person is so busy doing and continuing doing, they don't have time to be that strategic thinker. So looking at it from a bigger picture, if you will, how does my team connect to the overall goals of the organization or the department and the goals of the organization? And you have to take time to do that. And the survival technique of that is you have to start delegating and figuring out, what do I need to be doing versus what someone else can be doing.
Right. Great. Thanks. Now, I think you have answered this already, and here we have Marcella saying it's a great perspective. So thank you. Thank you, Mars. I think you have covered this a little bit, but on a whole, why do so many new managers struggle with delegation? I know you have
Oh,
touched on it a little bit.
well, when I've asked them that, what's keeping you from doing it? It's things like, oh, it's going to take too much time to train them. Oh, I'm afraid they won't do it the same way I will, or they'll make mistakes. I don't want to own their mistakes. And so I reverse it and say, okay, what is the message you're giving your team by not delegating? And then they think about it, it's like, oh, that I don't trust them, that I don't
Hmm.
think they have the skills. I'm holding back. I'm only concerned about you're only concerned about your growth, not my growth. You're not helping me develop. And so it's like, and then a lot of people, will say, the manager will then say, oh, that's not my intentions at all. But you have to look at it from their individual contributors, their team members. What does it look like for them? So when you start delegating, they start building their trust in you because you're trusting them.
Hmm.
And yes, I will tell you, they're not going to do it the same way you would do it. But what's to say they might not do it better or found a different way to do it? So part of it too is not delegation is not just handing off stuff to people. Delegation is, yes, it depends on the individual, but you don't just delegate, you just don't give it to them. You start helping, you support them as well. You
Hmm.
may start off doing it in bite-sized pieces, whatever you're comfortable with, but then you have regular check-ins to see how they're doing, and that builds your trust in seeing what they're doing. But
Hmm.
the other part of that too is one of the reasons people succeed is because they already have questions in their mind when they're doing something. they're thinking through the questions, because that's what they're already automatically doing. And so when you delegate something to someone else, you're coaching them through it, saying, okay, if they don't know how to do it, where do you think you should start? What are some questions you need to ask? What approach would you take? You ask open-ended questions, because what you're doing is you're developing them to think that way with those particular questions that you already might have. And so by asking the questions, you can see, is the person thinking the right way? Are they asking all the right questions? Or are they premature, just starting to do stuff, but they don't have the stakeholders buy-in? Whatever that looks like, but you're asking the questions because it's informing you as to where they are in their growth and their development. And then that helps you know where you can help them develop in those particular areas. At the same time, it frees you up. Yes, it's going to take some time in the beginning, but eventually it's going to free you up later on and develop your team. I had one manager who noticed she was working 12, 14-hour days. And she finally admitted, she said, I'm sitting in the office and I'm watching my team. They're leaving at 6 o'clock. I'm still here, and I know I'm going to be here another 3 or 4 hours. She's like, what's wrong with this picture? So it does take some time. Part of it is delegating out of frustration or out of needing the help and just realizing. One manager, I asked her, okay, what would be the benefits of you delegating more? And she said, I'd finally get to take a vacation.
Wow.
So,
and that makes a lot of sense. But the other thing too that I've come across is that some managers are afraid to delegate because they feel that they may put a lot of effort into this particular individual, and then they just up and leave.
Okay.
Yeah, they just get up like, they're skilled. So that's one part of it. And the other part is that, well, I'm training you so well, you might take away my job. Those are real things, real issues that I've come across with some of the clients I've worked with.
And actually, I had someone I coached yesterday that made that same second comment. That was afraid that would exactly happen. So to answer your first question, they may up and leave. Do you have control over that? That's an assumption you're making. They may do that, but that's in the future. What's the immediate need that could help your team? It may be part of what in getting to know your team is asking them, what do they enjoy doing? What do they want to do more of that they can contribute that maybe they haven't had a chance to do? If they get to do more of what they want to do, they could encourage them to stay on the team as well. And by the way, 50% of people don't leave bad companies, they leave bad managers.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And Marcella has another comment here that says, I think that many times delegation is also learning to manage egos and trust others, understanding they are not going to do things the same way you would, especially for managers that need to feel they are in control. Those are good points.
It is good points. It is good points. And yes, you do need to look at egos. And the second part that you mentioned too is they may do it better than and may not need me. Well, usually on teams, a lot of people, there used to be this mentality that everybody on the team needs to have these certain strengths. But the opposite is true. You want people that have different strengths. That actually makes a team stronger. And so for someone, they may do something better than you, but it may also be because it's not your strength.
Right.
So management, as I said, a lot of times people are brought into management positions to develop teams. So it's part of your role to develop people and to help them to succeed as well. You have no control if they decide to leave, but you do have control over how you help them and how they're going to help the team, because that's a reflection on you as the manager.
Exactly. And even if they end up being promoted, again, that's a reflection on you as well, as somebody who is ready to develop others.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay. Now, Tell me, what are some of the signs that a manager is struggling to delegate effectively?
Being frustrated, being overworked, the team may have a low morale, people aren't showing initiative, people are holding back, things of that nature.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and what can they do if they recognize that these are some of the things that's happening to them? So, in terms of low morale, for example, what can they do
Well,
to
part of
help
it,
the team?
sorry to interrupt you. So part of it is you may be delegating, it's how you're delegating.
Mm,
For example, if it appears you're only giving stuff that you don't want to do, without really learning what does the person enjoy doing?
mm-hmm,
Where are their strengths? For example, if someone is not strong in, I use Excel, for example, quite often,
mm-hmm.
um, and you give them a task in Excel, they may do it. But it may take them 5 times longer than if you have someone that's strong, they're stronger suited to Excel. The person that's not their strength, they're seeing that as more work to do. The
Mm-hmm.
person works their strength is like, I got this. So part of
Yeah.
it's the way you're delegating,
Mm-hmm.
asking people again that thinking process. They're struggling, so have those check-ins. How are things going?
Mm-hmm.
Asking those open-ended questions. Where are you struggling? How can I support you? Because
Mm-hmm.
then it becomes a collaborative effort. It's not you dumping work on your team.
Yes. Okay. Good. Now, how can new managers balance their desire to stay hands-on while
Mhm.
also empowering their team?
Well, doing some of the things I just mentioned about having those touch points, seeing what support they need, asking the open-ended questions, even asking for things like, where do you see maybe some process improvement might be made?
Mm-hmm.
So again, it's you're respecting the person's intelligence, respecting the person that they do have talents and abilities, asking them too, what are their goals? Where do they want to go after this next role? And having them support them in that.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they say they want to look, maybe they do want to go to another department. Well, could they shadow? How
Yes.
can you support them? Because any way that you are showing you're supporting them, they feel like they've got a colleague, not just a,
Okay, boss.
there you go. Thank you. That's the, exactly.
Right. Okay, good. Now, and this is something I've come across as well. What's the difference between effective delegation and
Mhm.
micromanagement?
Again, effective delegation is you're working more as a team. Micromanaging is you give people something to do, but you don't really allow them to have ownership of it.
Mm-hmm.
Delegation is giving them ownership of it. Micromanaging is, yeah, I want you to do this, but you don't really take it. You don't really give it to them. You kind of hold back because what happens is the person stops thinking because everything they do, you start questioning. Well, is that the right thing? I don't think you should have done that. Well, why should they think? Why should they do if you're still doing it? So
Mm-hmm.
that's the big difference. It's the ownership.
Right. And it also shows a lack of trust as well.
Exactly.
They don't
Exactly.
trust the person to do the job.
Mhm.
And touching on trust, how can managers build trust in their team's abilities?
It starts at the beginning. When you become their manager, is having those one-on-ones with them, some sort of cadence. But at the beginning of that relationship, explaining what are your expectations of them,
Mm-hmm.
but also sharing your expectations of you. That we'll have check-ins. I will support you. Those kind of things. Establishing what kind of communication you want. How often do we want to touch base? We're also looking at virtual teams these days.
Mm-hmm.
So you just can't come to the person's office, your manager's office to ask questions. So what does that look like?
Mm-hmm.
Setting about maybe if there's some challenges, especially as you mentioned at the beginning, that now you're managing your peers.
Mm-hmm.
You may know of some struggles that have been with other cross-functional teams. So now you're in a position to help them with those relationships where maybe you didn't have that duty before, or the opportunity to do before. So you're showing them how you're working more collaborative. You're on their side, so to speak, recognizing their strengths, asking for their feedback, asking for their opinion. You're trusting their intelligence, and that starts to build that trust in the relationship.
Great. So with all the, the challenges that new managers face in terms of, leading, managing their team, what's a quick exercise that a manager can do today to improve their delegation skills?
One of the simplest, one of the things, if you're familiar with Stephen Covey's matrix from highly effective leaders, is looking at what's the impact and what's the effort. So literally making a list of all the things that you're doing. And of course, you can look at that online to actually get that framework, if you will, and look at what are the things that are really important we need to be focusing on, because they always have so much stuff to do. Versus another way that I have taken that is have people that I coach put it in Excel, look at all the things you're doing. What is the impact? Where should our focus be? But taking another step. And pausing and saying, okay, who could I delegate this to? Do I need to be the one to do this? Because there are things you cannot delegate.
Yes, of course.
Like timesheets, things of that nature. But looking at what can I delegate? Who can I delegate it to? How much of it can I delegate? Is it all of it or just part of it? We work in conjunction, together. But also, is this even our role? Does this belong maybe to another department? So maybe we need to talk about those relationships. Looking at deadlines, again, the importance. So a way to start is just look at what you're doing currently and maybe take one thing and start there. So you start on a small basis and delegate one thing and see how that could be. The other thing you could do too is, because I hear this so often, is people have so many meetings. I think that's one of the disadvantages we've had working virtual, right? Because you can't step into an office or talk in the hall or something like that. So everything's about a meeting. So looking at your meetings, how many of the meetings do I really need to participate in versus someone that wants to grow in their development and that's their thing. Maybe start seeing if they could come with me for a couple meetings and then slowly let them start doing that. So they're just updating you. So those kind of things work both ways. It's a benefit to the manager, but it's also a benefit to that team member.
That's a good point. That last point about, inviting them to the meeting a couple of times and then, letting that part go if you don't have to be there. That's a great point, because again, you're developing that particular individual.
Plus, it also goes back to what you said a few minutes ago, building that trust.
Yes, absolutely. Now, with all this delegating, how do you handle pushbacks?
Well, okay. Let's say if I were the manager and I were to delegate something to someone, and I could tell by the look on their face, oh, they're really reluctant. Again, asking open-ended questions. Okay, help me understand. What are the reasons that you appear to be reluctant to take this on? Maybe they don't have enough background information. Maybe they don't have confidence in themselves. But you don't know. Don't make assumptions. One of the things too, in doing that is, again, asking the open-ended questions. Don't make assumptions, but also, if you know the person, again, learn their strengths and that sort of thing, then you might already know kind of what's going on. But again, you're trusting them. Yes. I trust that you could do this. But if you don't know what really their concerns are, and you just say, just do it, well, then you've just told me you're just dumping this on me. I don't feel like you're going to support me. It's the way you approach it.
Good. So how does a new manager know if they're succeeding in shifting from being a doer to a delegator?
First of all, they can look at their to-do list, their task list, or they can also see, the productivity of their team. Are things getting done? They're probably going to see some things that are getting done even better. They'll have time for strategic thinking. They'll have time. We talked about meetings, but they'll have time to maybe go to meetings with their manager at that higher level. They'll have time to make suggestions that to upper management that may help their team. They get a chance to see a bigger picture. They get a chance to maybe ask some meetings they want to be part of so they can understand the bigger picture of how their team may work or affect some other team. So there's a lot of those kind of things that can happen.
Mm-hmm. So when it comes to sustaining their growth beyond delegation, what habits would help first-time managers to do that?
Beyond just delegation in their particular development?
Yes. What habits would help first-time managers to sustain their growth beyond just delegating? Yeah.
Well, I'm sure you can answer a lot of this too, Daisy, with the work that you do. One of the key things is about communication, being more concise. One of the things is learning to not be so much in the weeds, especially when you're presenting to upper management. Learning to, we talked about emotional intelligence. What audience am I talking to? What do
Yes.
they know? Because one of the mistakes people will make is they're talking to upper management and they're too much in the weeds. So there's not enough time to get to what they really want to say.
Yes.
But another sense too, and this could even be with your team, is when you get too much nitty gritty, sometimes it's almost an insult. You're assuming I don't know what you're talking about and I'm
Mm-hmm.
dumb, kind of thing, so that's kind of a turn off.
Right.
The other thing is those collaboration uh, relationships with cross-functional teams, upper management. Strategic thinking is definitely one. Influence. Who do I need to influence? Maybe, for example, maybe my team needs more resources. Maybe we're
Mhm.
short-staffed. Well, who would I need to influence, or what kind of case could I put together to prove to upper management? Because a lot of times it may not be their manager. You're putting together a case for their manager to present it to upper management,
Yes.
those resources. So several of those kind of different things.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. I know you, so you have worked with a lot of, new managers, emerging
Mm-hmm,
leaders, and all of
mm-hmm,
that. Can
mm-hmm.
you share a success story of a client who was able to transform their leadership through delegation?
Well, I have two of them. One is I was fortunate to work with a young woman who really wanted to go into management. She was an individual contributor, wanted to be a people manager. She had the opportunity when her manager was out on maternity leave to fill in. And it was a bad experience for her. So I became her coach right after that. And she said, I don't think I want to be a people manager anymore. It was awful. I worked so hard. I felt like my team wasn't listening to me. It was just such a struggle. So we backed up. Again, like we've been talking about, she knew her peers. And she felt like, I think they resent me that I was filling in, but I wasn't officially their manager. I said,
Yes.
okay. So we talked about, what do you know their strengths are? Have you just talked to them? In other words, what she was doing was just throwing stuff out at them, but never really talking and having conversation,
Mm-hmm.
not being respectful of what would you like to do. And even though she wasn't in that official role, now she was back in her role, she started building those relationships. Let's say resetting those relationships,
Yes.
resetting the way she spoke to them, resetting how now they saw her as supporting. And then when she became a manager, which she did, it was a totally different experience. She was so excited. She said, oh, this is so much easier. This is so much fun because I'm not doing all the work. Before, I felt like I had to do their jobs and my jobs because they weren't doing it the way I wanted it and all of those kind of things. But she started off wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Another one was this person was not a first time manager, was a manager of managers, but it was a new team.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing. Even though you're higher up, is still having those conversations. What are my people doing? What's working for us as a team? Again, those conversations,
Mm-hmm.
those one-on-ones where you're listening to the person. Part of one of the things too that managers need to look at is, what's the cadence of one-on-ones? For some people, maybe it's every week when you're starting out, or
Yes.
they're starting out, depends on where they are in their development and in their role. But then the one-on-ones, they tend to be task one-on-ones. What's going on, those kind of things. I also recommend having extra ones, whatever cadence works, for just development. How
Yes.
are things going? Where are you? Where would you like to do more of? And they don't have to be an hour. They could be 15 minutes.
15 minutes, yes.
But again, it's building that trust. And it's like your actions are showing, I care about you as a person.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to see how I can support you. It's also a time for managers to get feedback on their performance.
Yes.
One of the things when I was a people manager, when I first started out with my team, I would always tell them, I wanted them to be comfortable. And I would literally tell them this: if you mess up, because things are going to happen, come tell me, we'll figure it out. Because what you don't want to happen, they're scared to tell you. So what? It doesn't get better. It escalates. Right?
Absolutely.
So that's one of the signs.
Mm-hmm.
But going back to my story is then she learned how it could be more smoother. It was less frustrating. So it's not just first-time managers, even managers that have experience still have some of these same lessons to learn.
Mm-hmm. And that's why it's important too that managers can, schedule career conversations with their team members. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have, like you said earlier, it doesn't have to be long, just 15 minutes, and ask them about them and their development, not necessarily, all task related, So I'm glad you mentioned that that point. Now, what's one piece of advice you'd give to managers who are struggling to let go?
Think of the benefits. Well, first of all, asking themselves what's keeping them from doing it. And I'm big on using acronyms because I think it helps people kind of think about things. And so I've come up with one. It's called What's Ails You? AILS, meaning what are your assumptions? What assumptions are you making about that if I delegate, what's going to go wrong? Or when you're having conversations with your staff, the I is how am I interpreting this information? Okay. The L is what is my limiting belief that's keeping me from doing this?
Yes.
And then S is so what? You know what I mean? Yeah. If I've got those questions, keep asking yourself questions, coaching yourself. Yes. You got to figure out where what's keeping you from it first. And then asking yourself, okay, what's one action step that I can take to try this?
So I like that acronym. So the A is what assumptions am I making? The I is interpretation. The L is what are my limiting beliefs that preventing me from letting go? And the S is so what? I love that. So listen, I have come to the end of our questioning. So a couple of other questions. One is, where can people connect with you if they want to learn more? And the other part is, you did send me a checklist, and I would like you to tell people how they could get a copy of that first-time managers checklist.
Okay, happy to share that. First of all, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. Theresa Bilicek. You have my name that you see on the screen. You could also email me at teresa@bilicektraining.com, and I'll be happy to send you that checklist for new time managers. And I would love to get your feedback because it's a work in progress. People always have great advice and things and make things better. So I'm happy to share that with anyone if they want to connect, and if they're looking for a leadership coach, please reach out. I'd love to work with you or your team.
Absolutely. And the recording will be, the playback or the replay will be on LinkedIn for sure, because we're doing it here on LinkedIn, but it will also be repurposed into the podcast, which will be uploaded at some later time. So people will always have opportunity. It's also on YouTube, so people will always have opportunities to listen again to this very informative discussion around shifting from being a doer to a delegator. So Theresa, thank you so much for being my guest today, and we'll be in touch for sure.
Yes.
Thanks so much.
Well, thank you so much, Daisy. And these podcasts of yours are so beneficial. So I appreciate you doing them, because I know a lot of people don't have time to read a bunch of information. So it's great to be able to listen to it. And like you said, the playbacks, to go
Yes.
back, where did I hear that? So thank you for what you're doing.
Well, thank you too. I really appreciate it, and I really appreciate our friendship as well. Over 9 years.
Yes, ma'am. I
Yes.
do appreciate it as well.
Yeah.
So thank you, everyone, for tuning in today.
Okay. Thank you.